Hi everybody, welcome to Dram Daddy Whiskey. I'm Dan, and tonight we are going to be trying what might be the last of Maker's Mark's wood finishing series, their yearly limited release. And this year, it was a dual release. We've got Maker's Mark wood finishing series, BRT-01 and BRT-02. I believe this is the fourth release of Maker's wood finishing series. Started with the RC6, then they had the SE4 by PR something, really confusing one. And then last year they had FAE-01, which was released at the beginning of the year, and FAE-02, which was released at the end of the year. This year we had a little bit of a longer wait before we got Maker's wood finishing series. In the late fall, we got BRT-01 and BRT-02. Whereas last year, the theme of their releases was the fatty acid esters, ways that they would play with the idea of non-chill filtering and leaving those flavor components in there. This year, the emphasis is on barrel rotation. When I first heard about these releases, the strong impression that I had was that Maker's Mark was going to create different flavors in these two bourbons by having them in different locations of the rickhouse. BRT-01 is supposed to represent kind of the higher, hotter, bigger temperature swings of a rickhouse, whereas BRT-02 is meant to reflect the cooler, lower levels of the rickhouse. But if we read the back of the bottles carefully, and they do both say the same thing, it's a little more ambiguous. BRT-01 tells a story of the first 3 years of extraction at the top of the warehouse, which experiences large temperature swings. BRT-02 is all about the final years of reaction at the bottom, where it's cooler year-round. So I took a look at their website to try to get a better idea of exactly what was going on here. While these two releases are inspired by barrel rotation and the different locations in the rickhouse and how those different locations supposedly impact the flavor of the distillate, these two releases weren't achieved simply by putting the same product in different locations in the rickhouse. It was just inspired by that. And if we look at the front of each one of these labels, we can see what the real difference might be coming from. The wood finishing series is named that way for a reason. Maker's Mark, with each one of these releases every year, they finish their bourbons not by putting them in different types of barrels, but instead by putting different types of staves that would otherwise be used to make up a barrel into the distillate, into the barrel where the distillate is aging. And for BRT-01, in order to tell the story of the distillate that's aging at the top levels of the rickhouse with these temperature swings, they aged it with 10 virgin toasted American oak staves. For BRT-02, which is supposed to tell the story or emphasize the flavor components from the last years of aging in the lower level of the rickhouse, they aged it with 10 virgin toasted French oak staves. So the cynic in me wants to say that this whole deal about the barrels being in different levels of the rickhouse, and that's what this is about, that might just be marketing? I don't really know. If you have a better understanding of whether there were actually different rotations that went into each one of these releases, let us know in the comments. Because the only thing I could find on the bottles and from Maker's Mark is that there are different stave finishes here. And that kind of takes the wind out of my sails a little bit. But the most important thing is the whiskey in the bottles. So let's get to it. BRT-01. On the nose. Sweet. A little fruity. Caramel, lots of caramel, but you gotta dig deep for that past the sweet notes. And maybe the sourness could be like a strong tart cherry or something like that. I definitely smell the influence of the toasted oak staves on this. It's just a little bit of an oaky influence on it. I wish I had a better way to describe it. It's like if you had a cherry toaster strudel that had a little bit of the vanilla frosting and like some oak shavings on top. That's this nose. On the palate. Not as much going on the palate. The nose was really nice. The palate is not as nice. It's good. It's sweet up front. You get that caramel a lot. Maybe a little bit of maple syrup that I think is coming from the toasted oak. A little bit of that cherry as well. And the finish doesn't last too long. I'd say it's like medium at best, maybe like short to medium. It's pretty mellow. There's caramel and vanilla, but neither of them are too punchy. They're both pretty mellow. You get the classic Maker's Mark flavor profile, the funk if you want to call it that, really just in the front palate, and then it's all caramel and vanilla, but without that kind of rye spice to back it up, obviously, since this is a wheated bourbon, not a rye bourbon. And these are actually, like all Maker's products, it's the exact same mash bill. The first few times I had this, the finish was a little bit astringent. That doesn't seem to be the case tonight. That could be because I have just come off of having sort of an oakier bourbon, but it could also be just because there's more time that the bourbon's had, more air to the bottle. BRT-01 gets a score from me of 7.1. It's a good bourbon. It's a good bourbon for the proof. I'm not 100% sure I would ever be specifically in the mood for this bourbon. Gonna hold off on giving it a grade until I try BRT-02, and I'll give both releases a grade since they were released together. BRT-02! 02 on the nose. Much richer, darker, chocolate, vanilla. This is like a s'more if you drizzled maple syrup on it. Yeah, that's the best way I can describe it. Graham cracker, vanilla, marshmallowy, chocolate, and boom, maple syrup drizzle on top too. Delicious nose. I'm struggling to find a sour note, although I have picked up on that before, and I'm struggling to find any signature Maker's Mark profile. If you dig deep, you can find a touch of that sour note that some people find with the standard kind of Maker's Mark profile. And it does become a little bit more prevalent the more that I smell it as more air gets to it, but this is still a good nose. 02 on the palate. So a lot of the complexity on the nose is lost a little bit in the palate. There is more of the Maker's Mark signature profile that's present for sure. Let's give it another sip. So strong caramel in the front palate. It's actually a little bit drying as it creeps back. Definitely on the tongue. Much darker flavor, a little bit leathery, almost like maybe like a mocha or a coffee sort of aftertaste. You're left a little bit with that like soft caramel that I find a lot in Makers that could verge on the edge of sourness like a tart cherry, but isn't really pushing that way. This goes very much more in the realm of like darker chocolatey flavors than it does like bright fruity flavors. Finish on this one's okay. I'd say medium, short to medium, similar to the 01. So the score I would give the 02. BRT-02 from Maker's Mark gets from me a 7.4. Back to the 01 to compare. Yeah, on the nose, much sweeter, a lot more vanilla, and it is more obviously a Maker's Mark product. Yeah, much brighter. Brighter on the front, lighter, not as drying. Better than I first thought it was when I compared these two before. More straightforward in comparison. I'm not picking up on as much of the toasted oak notes as I was the first time around coming off of the 02. Back to the 02. So the nose is just so much richer. The 02 definitely has the best nose by a mile. It's really, really good. I do prefer it to the 01. One advantage the 01 has over it is it is not as drying. There's definitely more of an astringency, more of an oak presence on the 02. But the darker chocolatey notes do really well in this. With the 01, it's lighter and you get a lot more of the standard kind of Maker's profile. And when I'm looking for a limited release, I kind of want something a little bit more special. So the 02 bringing something a little bit different and kind of hiding that profile, since again, all of Maker's starts from the exact same distillate aged in the exact same way before there's any finishing. So the fact that it can depart from that and add these extra notes a little bit better, I appreciate that more and it makes me like it a bit more. I don't think you can go super wrong with either one of these, but in my opinion, in my taste, if I were to grab one over the other, it would probably be the 02. Although I'm sure there would be some nights where the 01 would be a better fit for my palate and what I'm feeling at the time. So what grade will I give these releases? I think people are let down a little bit because the FAE releases were a hit. They were a smash. They crushed it. Or maybe I'm just speaking for myself. I'm a little let down because I really love the FAE releases, 01 and 02. I do like these though, and the price is not bad at all. I think you can find these for usually around 60 bucks, give or take 5 to 10 bucks. And right now, at least in my area, they're everywhere. So the overall grade, I think I'm gonna give both of these because they were pretty close in score for the whiskey itself, that it could just be a matter of taste is which you prefer. I'd give them a B. Teetering on a B minus, but we'll go with a B. What do you like better? Have you had them both? Have you had one? Did you like it? Did you not? Let us know. From what I've seen, there's not really a consensus. Things are split a little bit, but I'd be happy to hear your thoughts on it. And now to try a little BRT 1.5. I must have had a lot more 01 because it tastes a lot like 01. Still good though. Till next time, cheers.